Alright, so I've received a number of questions about our light display we did this year for Christmas, and I just want to try to make a video to try to answer some of those questions. If I missed anything, just send me another message. I would kind of do a behind the scenes tour here too. So one of my favorite elements of this display is these four singing Christmas trees this year. As you can see, each one is actually just made up of 8 strings of regular old incandescent lights. I think next year I'm actually going to replace these the tree outlines with LEDs, but I'll leave the lights and the mouth shapes as incandescents. And basically each mouth is made up of 5 different strings of lights that, when turned on, and they make different shapes and kind of mimic the mouth movements. The trees, they're controlled by 2 controllers. Each one of them is 16 channels. Let's see, kind of have to be careful because they're still powered on. These controllers are Bernard SS16s. They are a community design. It's open source. Makes them real easy to modify if you wanted to. Actually, on this one here, I have modified. The modification on this one is usually these boards, they're driven by serial data from a computer, or RS-485, which is again controlled from a computer, and it receives data over a little dongle that would plug into your computer and convert it over to 4S85. But I didn't want to run any dongles or any long cables from our computers, so what I did was this is an ESP8266 module, and it's mounted on this little breakout board. What I did was I loaded the Arduino environment on this module here, and it's got a sketch on it that is running that converts E131 data, which is DMX over Ethernet, and it converts the E131 to serial data and sends the serial data over this ribbon cable down to where the input PIC would be on this board, and that way I can drive it over Wi-Fi without having to run any cables. And these boards, I forgot to mention, they're actually they're sold in kit form, so all you get is the bare board, and you have to solder on all the PICs and the ICs, the resistors, LEDs, all. It's just a bare board, and you have to solder all this stuff on. It's a really fun project, but it's actually what I enjoy most out of this hobby. And this cable here is just a regular network cable, again it carries the RS-485 signaling over to the other controller, which is just a completely stock Bernard 16. I chose these controllers because they, like I said, they're an open design. They can be modified. Like I said, they ship unassembled. You have to solder on all the parts. And it actually helped keep costs down quite a bit. You can buy controllers that do the same thing as these regular AC light controllers. These ones have 256 levels of dimming. They hold up really well. But if you went to like Lightorama or Animated Lighting Systems or any of the other commercial ones, you'll spend $300 or $400 for a 16-channel controller, whereas I built these for $40 for each board. And I mounted them in a Cable Guard CG1000 enclosure to keep them weatherproof, well, fairly weatherproof. I guess next up is the house outline. The house outline is made up of entirely pixels. These pixels are what's now called pixel bulbs. Each one houses 2 50/50 RGB LEDs. They're all 12 volts WS2811 signaling, and they're mounted zip tied onto a 1/2 inch PVC pipe, which is then clipped into this clips. That way all the different sections of the house, they just clip onto the house. Makes it really easy to take them up and put them down. That's one of the form factors of pixels that we used. The other one is these bullet style pixels that we mounted onto these frames to make a wreath. These frames are actually just 3 wreath frames you can get at any hobby store, and we just welded them together to give us the depth and zip tied all the pixels to the frame. All of the pixels for the house outline in the wreath, they're controlled by this controller. On all the pixels, of course, they're all wired up with all these pigtails. Each connection had to be soldered, heat shrunk, keep them weatherproof. But for the main pixel controller, and we mounted this in a CableGuard CG1500 enclosure. Main pixel controller is a SAN Devices E682. It's a 16-port controller. Each port is capable of controlling up to 512 DMX channels, or 170 pixels, I believe is what it is. And this controller also comes in a kit form. So all of the ICs, resistors, and all the connections and fuse holders, all that has to be soldered on. This big box up here is just a 360 watt 12 volt power supply. It powers the entire house outline and the wreath. It's like I said, it's 12 volts, and it makes it actually very efficient to run the show. This pixel controller, it gets its data over a regular computer network, and it's actually hooked up to this semi-retired router we have out here on the front porch. It also has an access point built in. That way it can send data over Wi-Fi to the other controllers, one of which being the Renard 16s. Another enclosure we used a lot of this year in the show is these ammo boxes here. We installed some watertight cable connectors on it. Let's get to this one here. In this one, I have my FM transmitter, which is just your basic FM transmitter you get off of. Got this one off of Amazon a couple years ago, actually a few years ago. It's got about a 2-mile range. I don't think it's quite FCC compliant, but it has good sound and does the job. Oh yeah, also in this enclosure is the computer that actually runs the show. This is a Raspberry Pi 2 B+. Actually, this is the original B. This is one of my old Bs. It has a flash drive that has all of our songs and sequences on it. It runs Linux, and it's running the Falcon Pi Player software. Makes it really easy to schedule and test the display. It actually runs a little web server on it that I can access over the Wi-Fi to start and stop and change the schedule. Same thing on the ESP modules that are used throughout the show. They have a built-in web server script as well. It makes it really easy to configure. Let's see. One of my other, I guess, favorite. Let me go over this little dongle here. Might as well mention that. This is just a Z-Wave outlet that hooks into our home automation system that turns on and off the Tune To sign at when the show's running. Again, it's just made out of corrugated plastic, essentially, and it has regular incandescent lights that poke through and make the design on it. Let's see. Another pretty cool element that I like is these these leaping light arches. They're made out of 1-inch PEX tubing. That's it appears white, but it's really kind of translucent, so it lets the light shine through. And each arch has about 10 feet of pixel strip mounted in it. It's 3010 pixel strip, 12 volts, and it has for every section there's 3 pixels and then one WS-2811 driver. Allows them to be any color, any channel. Does really nice chase effects. Well, that's fun stuff. The frames are made out of 3/4 inch PVC tubing. On the connectors down here, the T connectors, I actually had to take a Dremel and round them out. That way I can get my 1/2 inch PVC in there and throw a couple screws in each end to secure them. And these just daisy chain off of each other. Total for all 3 is about 150 pixels, and they have the pigtails that connect to each other that we had to solder and heat shrink on. The controller for the arches, I think next year I'm going to use a lot more of them because they just make more sense to me. And I have the controller for the arches mounted in one of these ammo boxes again with the watertight connectors. But the controllers, again, the big box in here is just a 12-volt power supply. The controller for the arches, actually this little guy right here, this is again a ESP8266 Wi-Fi chip. And this whole board is just a breakout board. And again on the ESP module, it's running a Arduino environment, and it has a script that is written for it that controls up to 3 DMX universes of pixels. So I can get usually about 320 channels, I believe it is, just off of this little guy here. These modules here, you can pick these up for about $3 in quantity. It makes it a whole lot more cost effective to run pixels. That one SanDevices controller was pretty reasonable. I think it was about $60 or $80 in kit form to assemble. But like I said, those ESP modules, $3, and you can run 3 different DMX universes, each one being 510 channels or 170 pixels for $3. I think I'm going to use quite a few more of those next year. I guess up next is really the secret sauce, is the software we use to create all the effects and control all the lights. I'll have to do a separate video about that. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Any questions, or if I missed anything, just send me a message.